how successful dads are examples. They just are. Our children look up to us. They do. Children always look up to their fathers. They look up to the person who's the father in their life, the person who pours into them. And your life influences them for good or for bad. No dad can get away from being an example. He just can't. Absent dads are examples. Present dads are examples. We just are. Every man who's a father is an example. And the type of example we are comes from how we live as a man, what we do. Our daily choices are the most important part of how we live as examples to our children. Sometimes we think, well, it's no big deal, but it really is a big deal. There's a poem, a famous poem by a guy named Edgar Albert Guest called His Example. Let me read you what it says. It says, "There are little eyes upon you, and they're watching night and day. There are little ears that quickly take in every word you say. There are little hands all eager to do everything you do. And a little boy that's dreaming of the day he'll be like you. You're the little fellow's idol. You're the wisest of the wise. In his little mind, you have no suspicions to ever rise. He believes in you devoutly, holds that all you say and do, he will say and do in your way when he's grown up, just like you. It sometimes makes me shudder when I hear my boy repeat some careless phrase I've uttered in the language of the street. And it sets my heart to grieving when some little fault I see, and I know beyond all doubting that he picked it up from me. There's a wide-eyed little fellow who believes you're always right, and his ears are always open, and he watches day and night. You are setting an example every day in all you do for the little boy who's waiting to grow up to be like you." I think that poem really puts it into place, our job as examples of father. Now, this one is from a son's perspective, but it's the same thing for our daughters. They're watching us, they're looking at us. And if we want to be a positive example to our children, we've got to make some key choices in our life. We just do, if we want to be a good example and not a bad example. One of those is we've got to build our own foundation. We just do. Every person bases their life on something. Your life is based on something. You may say, well, I just kind of live life. No, you're basing your life on something. And what we need to do as men is choose what's the foundation of our life. What philosophy are we going to live by? What worldview do we want to live by? Am I going to live from a selfish worldview? Am I going to live from a scientific worldview? Am I going to live from a biblical worldview? You have to choose which worldview is the best. I think the biblical worldview is the best. I think throughout history we've seen the positive aspect of that. But you've got to choose something. If you don't, you're going to default to a natural, kind of a selfish worldview where it's all about you. And that's not a good example for our kids. The reason it's important to choose a foundation as a dad is because that's what you show your kids. If you want your kids to live a life of purpose, you have to live a life of purpose, which means there's got to be something that you're living for. There's got to be a foundation in your life. We have to be able to explain things to them. We have to tell them why. And we have to show them something that's bigger than just what they think, bigger than what they feel in the moment. We don't want to be examples of hypocrisy to our kids. So what we want to do is find our foundation and live it out. We want to live the best foundation for our kids. We don't want to say one thing and then do another and then justify it to our children, because they're going to see past that. They're going to see that, you know, my dad really doesn't have a foundation. He's not really living for anything. Our life foundation is what we show our kids. It's how we live in front of them. And it influences the big and little decisions of our life and will influence their life. Now, the other thing we have to do is have intentional living. Now, we've talked about intentionality throughout this whole process, and it's just true because it's the key to being a great dad. It's the key to living a great life. You don't accidentally influence for good. You don't just accidentally influence people. Your intentional living is what influences people. When you intentionally do things, when you intentionally live a specific life, that's what influences your children. So the question is, what are you intentionally doing in your life that is an example to your kids? What kind of intentional life are you living? Are you intentionally living life, or are you just chasing life? Are you just wandering from thing to thing? Are you just surviving? We have to be intentional as parents. We have to be intentional in everything. Because intentionality is the only thing that brings purpose. Like if you want to have a good marriage, you've got to be intentional about it. The same thing, if you want to be in good shape, if you want to be healthy, you've got to be intentional. If you want to be a good dad, you've got to be intentional. So what you have to do is develop an intentional attitude. You're not just waiting for life to come to you. You're attacking life. You're going after life. You're living an intentional life. Doesn't mean perfection. It just means intentional. And the other thing we have to do as examples is have direct connection. There's this myth out there about the strong, silent type as men. And so many men talk about that. Well, men should be the strong, silent type. That's a myth. Men should not be the strong, silent type. They should be the strong, vocal type. They should be the ones who are strong, but they have connection. They speak life into their children. They speak love into others. They have a connection. And your children want a meaningful connection with you. You can be the strong, silent type if you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to have a connection with your children. You say, well, I'm just going to let my life be an example. Well, they may not pick it up if you don't connect with them. Every person wants a personal connection with someone else. They just do. We see it in every area of our life. When you go to work and you say, well, my boss doesn't even know who I am. What are you saying? You want a connection with them. You want to have a personal connection with your boss. Even if it's because you want to climb the ladder, that's fine, but you've got to have that personal connection. If you're a salesperson and you don't meet with people, you're not going to make any sales. It's just the reality of it. And a lot of people understand this in the dating world. I can't get a date. One of the biggest problems with dating today is people play date, which means they'll get on the apps, the dating apps, and see who they're connected to as a way of pretending they're actually going on a date, but they never go on a date. They never go out and have a direct connection with someone else because they're scared or whatever. So they're not really meeting anybody, so they don't have a direct connection. Our children want a one-on-one direct connection with us as their fathers. They just do. And we have to intentionally connect with each child. Even a short, regular connection is better than no connection. And what does it mean to connect with a person? It means you know them. And that's what your children want. Do you know them? Do you know their preferences? Do you know what they're into? Do you get excited about the things they're excited about, especially when it's age-appropriate excitement? Do you help them in accomplishing what they want to do? Do you challenge them? Do you push them? Do you have rituals and things you do with them, things you share with them that maybe you don't share with the other children, things that you do that will be a special memory for you too? That's a direct connection, and it only happens when you do it intentionally, when you do it as, hey, I've got to be an example of this. The truth is, all dads are examples. We just are, and we have to accept that responsibility. No one's going to make you be an example. You are an example. When you become a father, you're an instant example to your children, and they're going to look at you to learn, how do I live? What should I do? Too many men are not taking that responsibility, and we're seeing the devastation to our country. You have to take that responsibility as a man. You have to say, I'm going to be an example, and I'm going to be a good example to my kids.